Hey guys. Okay, I just always have to double check and make sure that we're actually live. Looks like we probably are, but hang on just 2 seconds here. All right, I see myself. That's always a good thing. All right, so let me get things set up here and ready to go. All right, awesome. Welcome, guys. Glad to have everybody here. We already had a big group that was waiting, and so I'm excited for another fun workshop. I like this time of year because I do so many of these fun workshops, and so these are good things, and I enjoy them. So while we're kind of waiting, we had about 160 people that pre-registered for the course, and so we want to kind of make sure that we give people a few minutes to kind of collect here. So while we're waiting, why don't everybody say hello in the chat? Let me know where you're from, what your garden zone is, you know, what your weather's like right now. We're in the hundreds, so it's odd that we're talking about winter and fall gardening, but it is that time of year, okay? All right. Oh, I wanted to show you guys this. This is always exciting news. Let me make myself a little bit bigger here. We got our first crookneck squash, and we like them small, so we intentionally picked them really small like this because they're nice and tender this way. But we picked our first crookneck squash from our garden last night, so super excited about that. As always, when we start getting things, it's weird. Usually we get zucchini before we get crookneck, and so it was nice. All right, so let's see. Well, let's go back here for a second and we'll kind of run through. I saw that we have somebody here from France, from Florida, Connecticut, Texas, Southern Indiana, Florida. All right, good deal. New Jersey, Mississippi Gulf Coast, Maryland. Great. Good stuff, guys. All right, we're up to about 40 people here, so I think we'll kind of start moving along. I want to honor everybody's time, so we'll not spend a whole bunch of time messing around here. So I did want to make sure that I thanked our sponsors for this video, which are Honest Seed Company and Smart Pots. They have given us some prizes that we're going to be giving away later on. Both awesome companies. I've included links in the description of the video to their websites. Great companies that you guys should go check out, and we'll talk more about them when we do the prizes, which will be coming up after we do the class. Oh, and also, I didn't do a very good job of advertising this. There's actually a free workbook that goes along with the three. So I'm going to be doing 3 workshops. I'm going to do this one today, then another one tomorrow, and then another one on Thursday. And we made a workbook last year to go along with these free workshops. And so there's a link in the description you can click on, and all you have to do is just give us your email, and that then connects you over, and you can get that free workbook as well. So that is down in the description. I didn't do a very good job of advertising that, so I apologize. For those of you that had pre-registered, I forgot to put that in the email this morning that I sent out, so I apologize for that. But you can go get that free workbook anytime. It's available there, and it's just downloadable. It's like 10 or 12 pages, and a good little resource for you, okay? All right. Kind of just looking here. Colorado, Cheyenne, Wyoming, another Maryland, West Virginia, New York, Memphis, Colorado Springs, Oklahoma, another New York, Sacramento Valley, California, Ohio. Great, awesome, lots of people here. Okay, we're up to about 70, so let's go ahead and kind of get moving along. So, like I said, we are going to be doing 3 of these videos. This is day 1, and we're going to be talking today about some of the base crops that we can be planting in our fall and winter gardens. Tomorrow we'll talk about timing. We'll talk about when you should actually be planting and getting those crops in. And then on Thursday, we'll talk about how we can protect those crops. And all 3 of those will be starting at the same time, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. So those are coming up. Make sure you hang around. This is all part of our year-round gardening master course launch. And there is an opportunity for you to get a free course. It's our succession planting course that goes along with the Master Gardener course if you sign up for that today. So hang around. I'm going to talk about that later, but you guys are here to learn first, so we'll not spend a lot of time on the sales part. Okay, so again, these are kind of what we are going to be, this is what we're going to be doing for today. We're going to talk about 7 base crops that you can be planting for your fall and winter garden. We're going to talk a little bit about the hardiness of each crop and how to grow them. And we'll kind of go through, which ones are best for what areas. And then I will take some time at the end of the presentation for questions. So while I'm actually teaching, I have a really hard time keeping track of what's happening in the feed. So I can see all your guys' comments right here in the feed, but I have a really hard time keeping track of that. So my wife AJ is upstairs, and she is following along and looking at your questions, and she's copying and pasting them into a sheet so that when we get to the end, I'll answer them. So don't feel like I'm ignoring you right now. I will get to your questions towards the end, okay? All right, so this class today is for those of you that live in colder winter climates. So zones 3 through 8, 8 being kind of the outer edge there. For those of you that are in 9 and 10, I'll still teach you some good things, but the timing gets all messed up for you guys that are in the warm areas and when you're planting. And so this is specifically meant for those of you guys that live in the colder areas. It's also beneficial sometimes if you can start some seeds indoors. So like tomorrow when we talk about the planting dates, you may not have room in your garden to start planting on August 1st. So it might be better for you to start some seeds indoors on August 1st. So not 100% necessary, but it is helpful if you can do some seed starting indoors. And then and Lou, yes, there will be a replay available. I did see that. And then just so that you guys know, this is part of the master class and the promotion that I've got around it. So at the end of the class, I actually have an offer for you. If that offends you at all, then this isn't the right workshop for you. So just so that you know that as well. Okay. All right. So who am I? My name is Rick Stone, and most of you guys know me from my YouTube channel, but I'm also the founder of the Gardening Academy, which is our monthly membership service. And I'm the principal author of the website Our Stony Acres. I'm a master gardener, and I've been gardening for 23, it's actually more like 25 years now. Plus, I grew up around gardeners, and so did my wife, and so, we have a lot of gardening, experience under our belts over the years, okay? Now, is what I want to do, this is kind of introducing to you guys the idea of a year-round garden. And it's something that's possible for nearly everybody. And we'll talk a little bit, here in a minute as to where it's the most beneficial and stuff. But almost everybody can do some type of gardening year-round. The thing that we found, and we started actually having this discussion in about 2008. My wife and I noticed how better our family ate during the summer. So we had tomatoes and cucumbers every night with our, whatever else we were eating for dinner. We would have tomatoes and cucumbers on a plate next to them. We would have salads and zucchini casseroles and just all these things that involved fresh vegetables. And we had raspberries and strawberries and melons and, just all this great fresh produce. And then we noticed that even though we were still canning and preserving, we just weren't eating as good in the wintertime. And so I started doing a little research, and that's where I kind of discovered this year-round gardening. I read a couple of different books, one by Elliot Coleman, the other is by Nikki Jabor, both really good books that will help you along as well. And that kind of got us determined. And so that was kind of the winter of, the fall and winter of 2008, 2009. And so we determined in 2009 that we were going to have a year-round garden. We were going to grow year-round. And remember, we live in Utah, Zone 6B, okay? And so this is what's possible for you guys. Since we have done this, we've implemented hoop houses and cold frames and fabric row covers and the right crops, and we have had something fresh that we could harvest from our garden every day since May of 2009. So, a long time. Now that's 13 years that we have had 365 days worth of harvest. Now, did we harvest every day? No, we didn't, because a lot of times in the wintertime we'll probably do, like a weekly harvest. We'll go out on a Saturday when it's warm and harvest all the carrots and spinach and things that we need for the whole week. But we always have had something available since May of 2009. So, what is it like for those of you that live in the different zones, okay? So if you live in zones 8, 9, and 10, this should be pretty easy for you to do. You have warm enough weather even in zone 8, where I recognize zone 8, you'll still get some freezing temperatures and stuff like that, but your temperatures are warm enough that having a year-round garden should be pretty easy for you. In zones 5 through 7, you guys are the ones that are going to benefit the most from this, because all of a sudden when you haven't had anything in the wintertime at all of a sudden it's going to open up a big possibility of a whole bunch more plants that you can be growing in the wintertime, okay? Now, in zones 3 and 4, it's a little bit harder for you to pull this off. The number of crops that you can grow all the way through the winter drops down to maybe just a handful. But you still can, using cold frames, hoop houses, and row covers, you can still have a harvest all through the winter. A little bit harder in those cold zones, but it is still possible as well for those places, okay? All right, so how do we extend our garden growing season to 365 days a year? There's 3 things that are involved. Number 1, you have to choose the right crops, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is choosing the right crops. If you live in zone 5, you are not going to be growing tomatoes in December. It's just not going to happen. Unless you have a heated greenhouse that costs you a ton of money, it's just not going to happen, okay? But you can have a whole bunch of leafy greens and root crops that are going to do really well in December and January and throughout, okay? The next thing is you need to be planting at the right times, and we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow in tomorrow's workshop. But essentially, we're planting these crops so that they're ready to eat before the sunlight really starts to disappear. So before we hit those 10-hour days and less in the wintertime, we want to make sure that our crops to maturity by then, okay? And then the last thing is you need to do some protection. So obviously, if you live in zone 5, you can't just throw lettuce out in the garden and expect it to survive unprotected in the garden. And so those are the things that we're going to be talking about over the next few days. So today we are going to cover these 7 crops, and there's total around 30 crops that you can grow at some stage or other during the fall and winter months and even the early spring months. But these crops that we're going to talk about today are kind of the base crops. These are the ones that are going to take up the bulk of your space and that are really going to be beneficial for you. And then you're going to fill in with a lot of the other fun crops that maybe don't produce quite as much, but will still give you some fun. Okay, so this is the list of them, and we're just going to kind of go through and talk about each one of those here for a few minutes. So let's talk first about lettuce. So I put lettuce number 1 because it's actually the least hardy of all the crops that we're going to talk about today. Lettuce does pretty well until our temperatures start to be in the low 20s consistently at night. So every once in a while, if it dips into the low 20s, your lettuce is still going to be okay. But once we start consistently seeing those cold temperatures, then lettuce doesn't hold out as well. Okay, so lettuce is going to be one of the first crops that you start to harvest. We'll be planting it at the same time that we do all of the other crops. Just recognize that that is one of the ones that you are going to get to first. Okay, now there are some very good varieties to grow in the winter. One of them is called winter density, okay, and that is it's a bib lettuce, or kind of a not really a romaine, but a what do you call them, a butter crunch or a butterhead lettuce, okay, and that does really well and stands up really well to the cold temperatures. Also, believe it or not, the summer crisp varieties of lettuces also hold up really well to the cold temperatures. And I know that sounds funny, but varieties like Nevada, Muir, Magenta, Cherokee, Fusion, all of those lettuces also hold up really well to the colder temperatures and will stand up pretty well. So for us, we're usually able to harvest lettuce until about Christmas, okay, in zone 6. So we're zone 6. Our first frost is usually somewhere between October 1st and October 15th, and we usually are harvesting lettuce right up until right around Christmas time. And then what happens is there's this freeze thaw cycle that happens, and lettuce eventually gives into that, and it becomes kind of mushy and gives out, and the plants die. So, but still a really good crop for early winter, and then you can plant it again in late winter for good early spring harvest. Okay. Next on our list is spinach, and for those of you that missed it, last Friday we actually did an entire workshop on growing spinach in the winter time, and that is still available on our channel and will be for at least a couple of weeks. And so you can go watch that one. It's just there. Just search growing spinach in the winter, and you'll see the workshop that we did last week. But spinach is really the workhorse of our winter crops because it is so hardy and it does so well. And depending on where you live, you can get up to 8 months worth of harvest from one planting of spinach. And it actually, the colder you are, the longer your harvest will be, because spinach likes that cooler weather, and so it grows better in the cool. If you live in the warmer zones, your planting times are going to be later and later in the year, but those of us in the colder zones, we can start planting in August, and then we start harvesting in October, and so you can really have some good long plantings, and they're very hardy even for the colder zones. So spinach does really well even in those like zone 3 and zone 4 gardens as well. It will survive over the winter for you, so it's a really good choice. Okay, all right, next is Swiss chard, and I guess I should turn so you guys can see the picture. Swiss chard is as hardy as spinach, but it's a little bit more problematic in that Swiss chard can get very tall. I don't know how many of you grow Swiss chard, but I'll often have Swiss chard with just great big leaves that are 2 or 3 feet tall, which doesn't always fit well in hoop houses or especially in cold frames. And so the way we deal with that is we plant it a little bit later than we would spinach, and then it doesn't mature. And then we're able to harvest those leaves smaller. And they're great for salads. They're great as cooked greens. And then once things start to warm up in the spring, those plants will, really take off, and you can get the bigger ones. And, some people like the stalks on Swiss chard. It's kind of like celery. And so those plants will mature later. But if we plant them a little bit later in the year, then it keeps them small, and they do really well for either cooked greens or in salads. Okay? All right. I'm going to take a drink and look at our list here. Wow, guys. 134 of you here. That's awesome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. So Mama Preps is saying, I had spinach that I planted last year that survived all winter and just recently went to seed. And that's exactly what's going to happen with a lot of these plants. So I plant in August, and it goes to seed for us, it usually goes to seed in late April, early May, sometime like that. So, and that's going to be the case with a lot of these. So, okay, let's move on. Asian greens. Okay, so there are a couple of Asian greens that do pretty well. This one in this picture is called tatsoi. Okay. Tatsoi is very similar in hardiness to spinach and Swiss chard. It's very tasty. It has kind of the texture of spinach, but with a cabbagey flavor to it, if that makes sense. Most of the Asian greens are in the cabbage family, and so they have kind of that cabbage flavor to them. Bok choy is also another good option. It's less hardy than tatsoi, but does really well in the fall. And one of the things I like about planting bok choy in the fall is it usually doesn't bolt. I always have problems with my bok choy bolting, like really quickly. As soon as it starts to warm up, it bolts. And that doesn't happen nearly as much in the fall. So Asian greens are another really good choice for growing in the fall and the winter. Okay. Next is carrots. So if you guys have not tasted winter carrots, you have missed out on one of the greatest things in life. It's a totally different vegetable. What happens is the freezing cold temperatures change the starches in your carrots into sugars, and they become very, very sweet. Elliot Coleman calls them candy bar carrots. When my family learns that it's time, and I'm talking not just my immediate family, but my extended family, when they learn that it's time for our winter carrots to be harvested, everybody's coming over because they just love the flavor. They're just so sweet. It's just like a totally different vegetable. We love them a ton. Because we have declining sunlight in the fall and winter, you want to choose smaller varieties. So the big, long 8, 10, 12-inch varieties that grow big and thick aren't going to do as well in the fall. And instead we want to look for varieties that mature at like 4 to 6 inches. So our favorite is called Littlefinger, and they'll usually end up being about 4 inches and with decent sized thickness to them. Scarlet Nantes is also another variety that we have tried. Napoli is a variety that's also recommended by many of the authors, but I've never tried Napoli, so I just have to kind of trust them. Now, with carrots, they can be just grown outside. So you plant them in the late summer, you can grow them up in a patch, and then you could just leave them and cover them with some straw or leaves or fabric row cover or something like that, and harvest them all winter directly from the ground. The only problem with that is the ground freezes, and so it becomes really hard to get them out of the ground, okay? Instead, I like to put them in a cold frame, because every time it gets warm on a sunny day in the wintertime, my cold frame, the ground defrosts, and then it's very easy to harvest those carrots. So I like to do it that way, but carrots are super hardy and will do really well if you just leave them in the ground as well, okay? All right, the next one is called Mache, and I'm going to turn myself off here so that you guys can see this picture. Mache is actually originally came from France and the Mediterranean region. It's sometimes also referred to as corn salad or lamb's lettuce, okay? And it's a really good tasting lettucey salad type crop. This is a salad crop, so it's not a cooked green. It's one that you're going to use in a salad, and you actually harvest those entire plants. So it's not a cut and come again like lettuce. You just cut the whole plant off and use that whole plant. It has a really, really yummy, nutty flavor to it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it kind of tastes nutty when you're eating it. So it's just a really good variety to grow. The other nice thing about Mache is it grows really well in the low light. So again, it hailed originally from France and the Mediterranean region, which actually longitude-wise kind of lines up with a lot of us that live in zones 5, 6, and 7, and so it responds well to the same light conditions that a lot of us have here in the north of North America, both in the United States and Canada. And so it will continue to grow even when we don't have 10 hours of sunlight or more. And so it's really good. It's super hardy. One of the few plants that you can harvest frozen, and it's going to be fine. Just a really good overall plant, and it is available. It's fairly easy to find. I know a lot of you probably haven't heard of it yet, but it actually almost every seed company that I've ever looked at has Mache, okay? And again, it could be Mache or corn salad in the United States and Canada. That's usually what it's called. Sometimes lamb's lettuce in Europe as well, okay? So a great little crop for you to grow in your winter garden, okay? And then our last one, let me just make sure. Yeah, this is our last one. So our last one is kale, okay? Now, I know a lot of people don't love kale, but you have to give winter kale a chance, okay? So the same thing that happens to our carrots happens to the kale as well. So it sweetens up. Those starches in the plant material sweeten up, and kale is a totally different beast in the wintertime as compared to in the summertime. So kale is almost indestructible in the wintertime. I have left kale unprotected in my garden, my zone 6 garden, and it has survived the winter. Most of the time we will usually cover it with a hoop house or a fabric row cover, but I have had plants survive the whole winter without any protection at all. Obviously, if you're in the colder zones than I am, that is probably not advisable. You're probably going to want to cover it up, but it will, will do really, really well. All three types of kale do well in the wintertime. So the flat-leafed Russian kale does well. The dinosaur kale or the Lasiano kale, that does well. But the best is the curly kales. So things like Vates or there's one called winter boar. Those kind of crinkly, curly kales do really, really well in the wintertime. Okay? So there you go. That is all of our plants. And for those of you, again, that are in the colder zones, the ones that you're going to want to target here are going to be Swiss chard, spinach, Mache, kale, and tatsoi specifically. Those 5 will be really good for those of you that live in zones 3 and 4. And then again, we'll talk on Thursday about hoop houses and cold frames and protecting them. But overall, these are kind of the crops that you want to be planting. Okay. All right. So that's all I have for the presentation. So if you want to start throwing some questions up, I'm going to really quick talk to you about the year-round gardening master course. Then we'll do the prize drawing, and then we'll leave some time for questions. And we've got 150 people here now, so that is awesome. Okay. So just really quick. I wanted to invite you to come and join me in the year-round gardening master course. So the year-round gardening master course is a course that we have, and let me turn myself off so that you can read all of this. This is a course that we've had since 2015, and it's a fun course, my favorite topic to teach. And it's about 5.5 hours worth of instruction, all pre-recorded, so you can watch it anytime you want. It isn't like you have to show up for a live broadcast or anything like that. It's all pre-recorded. We break it down into weeks, so there's 8 modules in the class in total, and we break that down into 2 modules a week, and we go through those over the first 4 weeks that you have the course. And I also do live Q&A sessions, so we get on a Zoom call, and I answer your guys' questions live every Thursday in the evening during this next month time. And we also have a private Facebook group. You don't have to be in the Facebook group. I know a lot of people aren't on Facebook anymore, but that's also there and available for you as well. So the course is open now. It's open July 5th through the 15th. So it is closing on Friday, and we only open it up once a year. We do open it up at Thanksgiving time, but we don't do as big of a deal. We don't do the Q&As and things like that at Thanksgiving. So now is the time to join. Normal cost for the course, and this is ongoing access, so you can watch it as many times as you want. You can actually participate in the following years if you want as well. That is normally $69 because you guys have come to this workshop. I'm going to give you a deal, and you can buy it for $59, so you can save $10 through the 15th of the month, okay? And also, if you sign up today, before the end of the day today, you can get the bonus course as well, which is our succession planting course, which will teach you more about rotation and growing crops in succession in your garden, okay? All right, let's do the prize drawing. I've already selected the prize winners, so again, thank you to our sponsors. Honest Seed Company and Smart Pots are awesome companies. I love both of them a lot, and they've been very supportive of us here on the channel and super generous to give us, all I had to do is just do this quick little mention, and they both gave us some great prizes. So we have 3 $25 gift certificates to Honest Seed, and we have 2 Smart Pots, one 15-gallon and one 5-gallon. And as what I did is everybody that pre-registered for this course, I put their name into the drawing pot and then put it into a random number generator, and it spit out the winners. So let's do those really quick. And then just so that you know, there's a link in the description of this video that you can go click on to pre-register for tomorrow's class. And that will make you eligible for the prizes. Now, if you signed up for today's, you don't have to go sign up again. Okay, if you win today, you can't win again. But if you signed up today for today's, you don't have to sign up again. You're already on the drawing list for tomorrow. All right, so let's announce the winners here. $25 gift certificates to Honest Seed Company go to Rich Minton and Carmine Pescatori, and Gale. Okay, and Gail, I know your email address. You didn't give me your last name, but I do know your email address, so I will send you an email with that as well. And then our Smart Pot winners are Shanti Simons and Tracy Waller. So congratulations to our 5 winners. Appreciate the companies again for sponsoring those prizes, and make sure that you go check them out. They are great companies. Okay, so let's do some questions. So here's what we're going to do. We already have, it looks like, about 10 questions that have been submitted. I like to try and keep these workshops to about 45 minutes just to kind of honor your guys' time. Sorry, excuse me. So let's go ahead and you guys can post your questions, and we still have about 120 people here, so post your questions. And oh, by the way, for the master course, there is a link in the description for you guys to click on that will give you that coupon and everything so that you can buy that. All right, so here we go. Let me get my list over here. So Sisters Breaking Bad, why do your cucumbers feel crisp when picked and then soft the next day? And why do cucumbers feel crisp when picked and soft the next day? Okay, so it looks like we had that question twice. I don't personally have that problem. I'm wondering if maybe you're waiting a little bit too long to harvest. So cucumbers, you want to, for them to be prime, they need to be small. So as soon as they start to bulge and stretch or change color from green back to yellow, then we have some problems. And so maybe try picking them a little bit sooner. It could definitely be a variety. Just the way that variety is, maybe they aren't as crisp, and so maybe you should try a different variety. I can't think of a physical issue or problem or pest or anything like that would be causing that. So my thoughts would be, are you watering consistently? You need to be watering fairly consistently, every three to 4 days during the hot summer. And then, make sure you pick them when they're a bit smaller. Okay? All right. Mama Preps says, what kind of fertilizer for carrots? Not very good at growing root crops. Okay, I don't use fertilizer for carrots. You could if you feel like your soil needs it, but I make sure that I amend my soil every year in the fall with compost. So I add in the fall, I add 2 or 3 inches of compost, and then every time I plant, so if I'm doing a rotation planting, I will add another inch or so of compost just to keep them healthy. Keep the soil healthy. And so if you treat your soil well, you really probably shouldn't need fertilizer. But if you feel like that you need to get some fertilizer on there, then there are several different varieties of organic fertilizers out there. With carrots, I would probably opt for like a liquid variety that you could just water in once a week, and then maybe every week to 10 days just water in with one of those organic varieties. And I don't have a specific variety that I love. I'm actually trying out a new organic fertilizer that I met the guy at our local farmers market, but I'm not sold on it yet. I just started using it this week, so we'll see how that is, and maybe I'll be recommending them in the future. But I don't have a specific brand. Just look for a good balanced fertilizer that that's at least a 10-10-10 or a 20-20-20, something like that, and that should help your carrots if you feel like it needs it. Okay, there were 2 books that I mentioned in the video that I learned a lot from. What were they called? They're right here. I have them here on my bookshelf. So the first one is 4-Season Harvest by Elliot Coleman. He's the granddaddy of year-round gardening. He's the one that really kind of invented it, and super good book. So really good. He has 2 or 3. One's called Winter Harvest. That one is meant more for like commercial growers. This one is a little bit more for gardeners. So 4-Season Harvest, really good book. And then the other one is Year-Round Gardener by Nikki Jabbour. And those are both really good. And Jabbour is spelled Jabbour, and it's Nikki, Niki. So both of those are really good books to get you started. Or you can take the master course from me. Let me put these back. Okay, next question is, have I tried growing sorrel? It's super hardy too. And yes, I have. We grew sorrel a few times. I haven't done it for several years because honestly, we didn't, I mean, it was good, but we didn't have that many uses for it. It's more like an herb. I mean, it has the kind of the texture of spinach or lettuce, but it has a very overpowering lemon flavor to it, and we just didn't have a lot of uses for it. You can't make a sorrel salad; it would just be overwhelming. So we used it as a mix-in in salads, and we used it as an herb, for a few dishes. But we have stopped growing it just because we weren't using it. I would put in 2 plants, and they would pretty much go to waste because we just didn't have a use for it. But you are right, very hardy, does really well. That's one of the 30 crops that are recommended for growing in the wintertime. So you're right, though, it does really, really well. Okay, Danny Days Homestead said, when should I start my fall plants, and should I start them indoors even though it's warm out? You live in zone 7B. Okay, so that's what tomorrow's workshop is about, and so I don't want to go into it in too much depth here, but essentially you're going to be starting in 7B. You're going to want to start about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. And yes, you definitely could start them indoors. I start a lot indoors just because I don't have room to start out in the garden yet. So I have, all my cucumbers and my tomatoes and my potatoes and stuff like that are, right at the planting time. Those are all occupying all my space. And so I will start things indoors and then transplant them out after those crops have kind of gone away, especially like my potatoes. The potatoes take up a lot of space, but they're usually out fairly early in the fall, and then I can transplant those out later. Okay, Mama Preps is saying, are there other root crops that grow well in cold weather? Yes, there are. Beets, turnips, radishes to some extent. Radishes don't do like the whole overwintering thing, but they do well in the fall. But beets, turnips, parsnips are all good other root crop options. Probably rutabagas as well, although I've never grown them, so I can't say that I can give you any real experience for that. Okay, let's see. Where can I get tattoo seeds? Not sure what tattoo seeds are. Or are we talking tatsoi? Is that what you meant? Tatsoi seeds should be available at most of your seed houses. It's a little bit harder to find than Mache, but most of the big seed places are going to have those. So and it's tatsoi, T-O. It was on the slide. Go back and watch it over. I'm not going to even try and spell it. I spelled it right. Let's see. Leaf curl on tomatoes. Could it be from overwatering or simply from the heat in zone 7B? That's not really on topic for this, but let me give you a stab at that. So leaf curl could have several different things. I actually lost a couple of plants to leaf curl, so there is actually a disease called tomato leaf curl that could be causing the problem. It's usually spread by grasshoppers and other chewing plant bugs. But leaf curl could also be heat stress. It could be over or under watering. So just make sure you dial in your watering. If you feel like it's heat related, if your temperatures are really up there high, you could offer those plants some shade in the afternoon, throw some shade cloth over, and hopefully that will help. And hopefully it's not the tomato leaf curl disease. Okay, I have raised beds with plastic covers. The cover is raised over the bed. Is this enough for fall and winter gardening? So this is Letitia asking that. And Letitia, the answer to that question is it depends on where you live. We'll talk more about that on Thursday's workshop. But in the warmer zones, usually a plastic hoop house will be enough. So in zone 7 and 8 for sure. Zone 6, it's for some of the hardy things like Swiss chard, kale, Mache. It'll be okay. But in the colder zones, a plastic hoop house is not going to be enough. Okay. All right. Next one is in zone 5, best date or temperatures that you should be looking for with these crops. First frost is September 15th-ish. Okay, so again, 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost is when you're going to be planting those. So you're going to be looking at now up through the 1st of August is when you're going to be doing that planting. And we'll talk a lot more about that in tomorrow's workshop if you want to check back in for that one. Southern sown and grown. My broccoli starts outside and they're doing good, but should I bring them in until fall? Yes, if they're bring-inable, they will do better inside under lights because they're just not big fans of those hot temperatures. That heat is going to cause them to want to bolt to seed too quickly. And so it's better to start the broccoli family crops to have those indoors. Okay, and I actually did a video on that. Look, first part of July, I did a video on that on my channel. I have giant kale tree seeds. Any advice on growing them? I've never grown the kale trees, so I don't have a lot of advice. I'm assuming that they're going to be very hardy, like the others, and so the biggest issue you're going to have is covering them because they do get quite tall, and so figuring out how to cover them is going to be your biggest challenge. Okay, DK Leith says, how do you recommend dealing with voles and gophers? Those are tough ones. It depends on your stance on that. I definitely, personally, don't recommend poisons because there's so much risk to other animals and wildlife. So poisons are definitely not the right choice. You could poison the neighborhood cats, dogs, other wildlife if you poison them. In the past, we have had a gopher every once in a great while, and we have used traps. So there's traps that you can put inside their tunnels, and those have been fairly effective. Or you could call an exterminator, but again, they're going to be using poisons. So sometimes you can flood them out, but that often just makes them move along to a different area of your yard. So yeah. So, and then the other option is to deal with them, let them be there, and you could put some chicken wire or something like that under your beds, so that and plant in cages that keep them from being able to get in. That's another option as well. Okay, Mary is saying her chard gets sun scald in the 90-degree heat. Should I just yank it and start some for later? That's what I would do. It will probably survive, but it may also just go to seed. So Swiss chard is unlike kale. Kale, if you planted kale this spring, it should make it through the summer and into the fall, and it won't go to seed until next year. But Swiss chard doesn't do that. So it's most likely that it's going to go to seed in this heat fairly soon if it hasn't already. So it's up to you. I mean, if it still tastes okay and you can cut out the sun scald parts, then you could keep using it. You could put up some shade cloth, or maybe it's time to just move on to something else in that area. All right. What seed companies do I use? Honest Seed Company is one of the companies that I really, really like. I also go with, it used to be called Mountain Valley Seeds. Now it's called True Leaf Marketplace. They're actually local to us, but they sell nationwide and I believe into Canada as well. So it's True Leaf Market. They bought Mountain Valley Seeds, and they have a great selection of both vegetable seeds and they also do a lot of sprouting and things like that as well. So that's a good choice. Baker Creek is a good choice. And I also will occasionally buy from Johnny's Seeds as well. But Honest Seeds is currently my favorite, so you should take a look at them. Have I ever tried any cold climate tomatoes for fall or winter, like Siberian or Polar Beauty? You're in 6B also. Okay, so those varieties are not going to produce in 6B over the winter. It's too cold. Those varieties are going to be really nice for early plantings. So you're going to put them out in March, or maybe even a little earlier than that, in wall of waters, which are those water-filled clotches that will protect them, for very early harvest. So that if you do that in like March, they'll be ready to eat in June, and so you'll get a really early harvest. But they're not winter varieties. Okay, they call them that because they will survive those colder spring temperatures, but ultimately they're not going to survive the winter in a in a 6 feet garden. It's just not going to happen. It gets too cold there. They may survive in warmer areas, maybe an 8. And definitely maybe a 9 and a 10, but yeah, they're not going to overwinter. It's pretty complicated to overwinter tomatoes. You got to have a heated greenhouse and stuff like that. So those are usually best for just for getting an early start on your tomatoes. The other thing about those varieties are, I've had a few of them, and they're not delicious. I mean, they're like grocery store tomatoes. So they're definitely not amazing, because they're bred more for survival than they are for producing yummy fruit. Okay, Cindy is saying my kale has a lot of holes in the leaves. They're still good to pick and eat if there are no bugs. So not sure what bugs would be. You need to identify what it is that's eating them. It's probably this time of year some type of grasshopper. It could be a cabbage, it could be a cabbage moth larva as well that's eating them. Could be, I've never had like sow bugs or earwigs. I've never had those bother kale. So most likely it's going to be like a grasshopper or something like that. With kale, the best solution there would just be to exclude those bugs, and so get some bug netting that you can put over the plants, and that'll keep them out. You could try some diatomaceous earth around them, possibly some like some insecticidal soap or something like that. But mild, easy to deal with things, that's probably about your only option is to kind of exclude them. So put either some light fabric grow cover or a bug netting over them to keep those bugs out and away. Okay. All right, Jennifer is saying, how can you get rid of cabbage moths? Now, the one thing you guys need to recognize is I'm an organic gardener, so I don't use chemical sprays. There are chemical sprays that can help deal with cabbage moth, but the best organic method for dealing with cabbage moth is exclusion. So again, putting a bug netting or a light fabric grow cover over the top of those plants will keep the adults, because it's those little white butterfly looking things. They land and lay eggs, and then those eggs hatch into larvae, and that's what eats your crops up. So if you can exclude them and keep them from actually laying eggs on your plant, then that's going to keep them off. And like we have kale that we planted in March, I think, that's still producing like crazy. It's under a hoop of light fabric grow cover, and so we don't have any cabbage moth problems, we don't have any aphid problems. So that exclusion method works really well. Okay, let me take another drink, and we're at about 50 minutes. So let me answer just a couple more questions, and then I think we'll call it quits for the day. Okay, so do I use a greenhouse to start my fall and winter plants? No, I don't have a greenhouse. We use cold frames and hoop houses, but not to start. So we just start our seedlings indoors. So our broccoli and cabbage and kale and lettuce and things like that, we'll start indoors under lights is what we will do for that. Okay. Do I have a course about growing fruit? I have a couple of different courses on growing fruits that are all in the Gardening Academy. So the Gardening Academy is our monthly membership service. You pay a subscription, and we have a strawberry growing one. I think I've got a melon one, and then coming up in the future, we're going to have a few others that go in there as well. But I don't have a specific course on growing fruit right now. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. Any others? I think I'll just look here. Okay, I think we answered all the questions, so I think that we will... I did not talk about Japanese beetles. Japanese beetles are a tough one. It's funny how different areas deal with that. If you find a Japanese beetle here in Utah, it's like lockdown. We had a city that actually quarantined a section of the city for like 3 years to deal with the Japanese beetle infestation, because we don't want them here in Utah. They're not normally here, and they're starting to show up, and so we just like attack them like crazy, and like literally the city quarantined and basically almost exercised what is it called, eminent domain on these properties, and said we are going to come and spray for these beetles to kill them. If you have a big problem organically, the only solution really is to, again, exclude by using, netting and light fabric grow covers to try and deal with those. Okay. And what about squash bugs? Squash bugs are fun to deal with. I'm dealing with them right now. There are some chemical treatments. If you're into chemical treatments organically, the first thing to do is to be out in your garden. You need to be out in your garden. You need to find those adults and squish them, and you need to find the babies and spray them with like a insecticidal soap, and you need to find the eggs and remove them so that you can keep ahead of the game. And so I've already been out every day. I do a little tour of my garden, and I end at my squash plants, and I go through and turn over those leaves, looking for the adults, looking for any babies that have hatched, and especially looking for eggs. And I will remove those eggs. You can scrape them off. I've been using tape. You can use like duct tape, and it'll pull them off without damaging the leaves. Or if your plant has plenty of leaf cover, you could probably just pull those off and throw them away. But organically, squash bugs, you have to attack, okay? Early on in the season, you could cover the plants, and that will help exclude the adults. But as soon as they start to flower, then you have to take the covers off, because you need the pollinators to be able to get into the plants. So it's really hard. I'm seeing people saying covering squash is impossible, and that really is the case. It'll help early on in the season, but like already it's covering now wouldn't do me any good, because I need my squash plants to be uncovered so that the pollinators can get to them and pollinate them. So squash bugs are just pain in the neck, and you have to get after them early, and then just consistency for organic. Okay. So is spraying with BT? BT, I don't know what BT is. You guys are going to have to tell me what BT is. Somebody's asking if spraying with BT is considered organic, even though it's not a chemical. And I'm not sure what that abbreviation is for. So, okay, and then let's see, Victoria. Okay, I'm gonna cut it off here. So we need to let you guys get back to your lives, but really quick. So Victoria, will leaf miners live under cover over the winter? They've infested your greens. So yes, they can. So leaf miner life cycles, depending on where you live and what type of leaf miner you have, there could be a couple of life cycles a year. There might only be one, but that miner that's going through and eating your leaves will eventually drop down into the soil and could overwinter, depending on the time of the year and the life cycle, could overwinter. Great way, though, to prevent is, number one, crop rotation. So don't plant greens in that same space next year. And then number two, exclusion. Again, if you cover with a light fabric grow cover or a bug netting, since I started doing that, it's almost completely solved my leaf miner problem. If you can keep the adults from being able to lay eggs on your greens, then you don't have a problem, okay? All right, I think that we are going to just call that the end. So thank you, guys. We went 54 minutes. I appreciate everybody being here. We had a good crowd, over 100 the whole time, so that is awesome. Thank you for being here. Just really quick, let me turn myself off and give you one last hard sell. Don't forget that the special on our year-round gardening master course ends on July 15th. and that special price of $59, including the free course. You need to sign up for that today. So there's a link down in the description to click on. And then tomorrow we will have another one of these workshops at 2 p.m. and we are going to be talking about timing and when we should be planting. And you can pre-register so that you're eligible for the prizes by clicking on the link down in the description. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys. This was fun. Lots of awesome questions this time, so I appreciate you guys being here and being a part of this, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay? Thanks. Happy gardening. See you later, guys.